Hi, this is Sarah from Oberstar Knits, and today I'm going to walk you through section A of the Nell Sweater. So section A will take you about to around here, around the yoke. There are some tricky parts in the front sections because if you look later in the pattern when we pick up the neckband, there should be this seamless purl column going all the way up the neckline, so we are going to make sure that we set that up for success in this section. This is viewed on the final right side of the pattern. If you've looked through the pattern, you know that actually the yoke is worked on this side. That's right, we're making it inside out. So you can see all of these brioche increases will look this way on the wrong side of the final pattern, but on the right side while you are working the yoke. You can see that they have the traditional forked appearance of a brioche stitch. So let's cast on and get started. All right, let's cast on. You will need your fiber, whatever fiber combination you are using. I am using 2 strands of DK yarn held together. And you will need your needles that take you to the correct gauge for your fiber combo. I will be using size 11, but again, use whatever size worked best for you when you were gauge swatching. Now, I'm going to be making a size small, so I need to cast on 47 stitches using the long tail cast on method. A little trick for getting the right amount of yarn for that long tail is I take my yarn and I wrap it around my needles 10 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now I know that I need about this much yarn to cast on 10 stitches. So I will double that. Now I know that's enough for about 20. And this is about enough for 40, and I need 47, so I'll just take about that much more. This is now going to be the point where I insert my needle to begin my cast on. I don't use a slip knot, I just hold it with my finger for that first stitch. I make my first stitch and now I have 2 with no slip knot on the bottom. So now I will just continue to do my long tail cast on until I have 47 stitches on my needle. And I'll catch up with you when I'm done. Alright, I now have my 47 stitches cast onto my needle, and I've flipped them so that the working yarn is coming from the right end of my work. And a little trick to remember what side you're on while you're working on this. When your tail is coming from the right end of the work, you are on the right side. Alright, so row 1, we are going to start with a slip 1 yarn in front. So I'm going to hold my yarn in front instead of in back, and I'm going to slip that first stitch and take my yarn to the back. Tighten up that tail just a tiny bit. And then my next stitch is a knit 1. We're going to be placing some stitch markers during this row so that we can mark our sleeves and our back and our front sections. So I'm going to put that first stitch marker on now because the row instructed me to. Make sure your stitch markers are big enough to go over your needle. Now I'm going to start to set up for my brioche stitch with a sequence of 2 stitches, a slip 1 yarn over and a knit 1. Slip 1 yarn over, you bring your yarn to the front like you did for that end stitch, but as you slip the stitch, you also take the yarn over the top of that needle. So you're not just taking it through in between, you're taking it over the top, hence yarn over. And then you knit the next stitch. So that's our sequence of 2 stitches that we're going to be doing. You see that the slip 1 yarn over gives this stitch 2 strands, or 4 strands if you're using a double yarn held together, but the knit only has 1. So we have a 2 and a 1. For a size small, I need to do that sequence 3 times total. I've done it once, so let's do it 2 more times. So slip 1 yarn over, knit 1, so that's my second one, and then 1 more, slip 1 yarn over, knit 1. So that's 3 times that I've done those 2 stitches, and then I end this section with 1 more slip 1 yarn over, and I place another marker. So now I have marked 2 stitches for my front section, and then all the stitches in between here are for my sleeve. now I will work across my back section. Since I ended here with a slip one yarn over, I'm going to start my sequences of 2 stitches for the back section with a knit. So I'm going to knit one, slip one yarn over, and I have to do this 14 times for my side, so I will catch up with you when I get to the other end of the back. Alright, I have repeated that 2-stitch phrase 13 times. I need to do it one more time, so I will knit one, slip one yarn over, and then I end this back section with one more knit one just by itself. I place my 3rd stitch marker, so now we have front, sleeve, back. Now I have to do one more sleeve, and then I should have 2 stitches left over for my final front section. So this sleeve section, because I ended this with a knit one, I will start this one with a slip one yarn over, knit one. I do that pair of stitches 3 times total, so 2 and 3. And we end the sleeve with one more slip one yarn over just by itself. We place our final stitch marker, and then we do our 2 end stitches, which is just knit one and then slip one with yarn in front. Not with yarn over, just with yarn in front. When we're working right side rows, you will always begin and end the row with a slip one with yarn in front. And when we are doing wrong side rows, you will always start and end with a knit one. We are going to pause for a second just to count our stitches to make sure that we have the correct number that we should. So when you're counting brioche stitches, I'll use the sleeve as an example. In my stitch count list after row 1, it says I should have 7 stitches in my sleeve. And you may look at this and be like, that looks like a lot more than 7 stitches. That is because of those yarn overs. When we are counting brioche stitches, you want to make sure that you only count a yarn over stitch as 1 stitch. So the ones that we did as knits in the previous row just have 1 strand. The ones that we did with a yarn over have 2. So if I'm starting at the end of the row, I should have 2 front stitches, 1, 2, which I do. And I should have 7, for size small, I should have 7 sleeve stitches. So remember, I'm going to count these as 1. A double stitch is 1, single 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright, now that you have counted and made sure you have the right amount of stitches between each marker, we are going to move on to row 2. This is a wrong side row, and I know I did say that every wrong side row starts with a knit and ends with a knit. This is the only exception. Remember, we're going to do some little tricks here to make sure that that neckband pickup is nice and smooth. So we are actually going to start row 2 by knitting 1 and purling 1 into the first stitch. So you would start as a normal knit, but do not remove the stitch from your needle just yet. You're going to bring your yarn through to the front and purl into that same first stitch. Now you can remove it from your left needle. So now you have 2 stitches where there was 1, a knit and a purl. Our next stitch is a slip 1 yarn over, and then we will slip our first marker. This row 2 is really going to be the first full brioche row that we do. Row 1 was more of a setup row. This row we will be doing an actual brioche knit stitch. So what brioche knit means, when you come to one of these yarn over stitches from a previous row, a stitch that has 2 strands, you will knit those 2 strands together. That is a brioche knit. So now we have 1 strand on the needle, and you can see that 2 stitches have been knit together below it. That is a brioche knit. When we get to working in the round, you will also be using brioche purls, which are the same idea, you come to a two-stranded stitch, but instead of knitting the two together, you will purl them together. But we don't have to think about that right now. We're just working flat, so all we need to know is a brioche knit. So for our sleeve, we perform the sequence of a brioche knit and a slip-one yarn over. That is our 2-stitch repeat for this section. We do it 3 times like we did earlier, so I've only done the first half of it. So my second one, I come to a 1-stranded stitch from the previous row. That way I know that I need to make it a 2. So I yarn over as I slip. That is the rule of thumb of brioche. You want to make each stitch you approach become the opposite of what it was before. So if I have a 2-stranded stitch, I need to knit it together to make it a 1-stranded stitch. If I have a 1-stranded stitch, I need to yarn over to make it a 2-stranded stitch. All right, so our sequence is a brioche knit followed by a slip-one yarn over, or vice versa, depending on what stitch the section begins with. So we've done that twice now. We need to do it one more time for the pair. So brioche knit and a slip-one yarn over, and it's an odd numbered section, so we have 1 stitch left. We brioche knit that stitch and we slip our marker. We're going to work across the back same way as we did the sleeve. So our first stitch that we approach is 1 strand, so we need to make it 2. We bring the yarn to the front, slip 1 yarn over, and then we have a 2 that needs to go to a 1, so we brioche knit. So that's our sequence for the back. We do a slip 1 yarn over followed by a brioche knit all the way across the back section. And I'll catch up with you when I get to the other end of the back. All right, so I have 1 repeat left of my 2-stitch phrase for the back section. So I begin that last pair with a slip 1 yarn over and end it with a brioche knit, and then I have 1 stitch left over because it's an odd number of stitches, so I end with 1 more slip 1 yarn over and slip my marker. All right, now I'm into the sleeve section. So again, my pair this time, I look at what my first stitch is. It is a 2-stranded stitch, so it needs to go down to a 1 with a brioche knit, followed by a slip 1 yarn over. So I do that 3 times, so that was 1, 2, and 3, and 1 extra brioche knit because there was an odd number of stitches in the section, and I slip my last marker. Ooh, not those stitches yet. And now we are at the front section once more. Our second to last stitch is 1 more slip 1 yarn over, and to match our 1 stitch increase we did on the first end of the row, we are going to work 2 stitches into this last stitch. This time we're going to start with the purl. So bring your yarn forward, purl into that stitch, but don't drop it from the left needle. Bring your yarn to the back again and knit. And now we have increased by 1 stitch. All right, so that was row 2. All right, let's begin row 3. This is the first row in which we will do a brioche increase when we get to the back section. But let's do our front section, which, as a reminder, is a little bit different than normal brioche up until about row 9. We'll be able to fall into normal brioche for the front sections then. So for now, just follow along with the instructions. We start with a slip 1 with yarn in front, bring it back to the back again. And this is unusual. We're going to go into a slip 1 yarn over for that second stitch, and then a brioche knit. So the only weird part is the fact that you slipped with yarn in front with this and then slipped yarn over this. Normally, once we get into normal brioche, you will slip this first one and go directly into a brioche knit. We will get there. For now, just bear with me. Slip 1 with yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit. All right, we slip that first marker. Now is the first time where we will see our abbreviation WIP, which means work in pattern. So instead of typing out every row, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit over and over and over again, I use the convention work in pattern because now we know how to recognize brioche stitches when we come up to them and what to do to them. So we have a single strand stitch coming up, we slip one yarn over to make it a double. We have a double stranded stitch coming up, we brioche knit to make it a single. So we work in pattern across the sleeve section. We don't have to count anymore. We can just go. And now we slip that marker, and here we come into our first brioche increase. In the pattern, you will see it written as brioche knit, yarn over brioche knit, or as I say it in my head, brkyobrk, whatever works for you. But essentially, we are going to take this single stitch and create two new stitches and one existing stitch. So 3 stitches coming from one. We are going to do our normal brioche knit into it, but do not remove it from the left needle yet. We are going to yarn over our right needle, and now we are going to go right back into this again, both strands, and knit one more. And now we can remove it. So now we see we have 3 single-stranded stitches coming out of one brioche knit. 1, 2, 3. All right, so we just increased 2 stitches with that increase. And now we are going to continue to work in pattern across the back section until 1 stitch before the next marker. So I will meet you over at that 1 stitch before the next marker. All right, so I have reached my last stitch before the next marker, and as you can see, it's a 2-stranded stitch, which means we are in the right spot. We are going to do another brioche increase, or brkyobrk. We're going to go through as if to do a brioche knit. We're going to leave it on the needle. We're going to yarn over, and then we're going to go in one more time and knit. So we have 1, 2, 3 stitches now coming out of that bottom stitch. And we slip our marker. We work in pattern across the last sleeve section. Oops. Sometimes they will get caught under each other. Just make sure you spread everything out so you can see a single versus a double. And you should know by your rhythm if you've come across the right stitch or not. All right, we slip our last marker and we work the end of row 3. As such, we brioche knit this double stitch here, we yarn over with a slip, and then we slip the last one with yarn in front. So we've increased stitches in our back section at either end. And now we will move on to row 4, and I will tell you how to resolve those stitches. All right, let's begin row 4. It is a wrong side row, so we will start it with a knit 1. And we will actually get a little preview of our in the round brioche purl stitch because we are going to do it in this second stitch of row 4. So we have a double-stranded stitch coming up. You'll bring your yarn to the front and purl the 2 together. That is a brioche purl. You won't see this again after this row until we join the neck and begin working in the round. So we've done our brioche purl, we slip one over, we slip our marker. Now we have work in pattern, slip marker 3 times. So that'll bring us through here. 1, 2, 3. So we're basically working in pattern all the way across until the last marker. So we will work our sleeve in pattern. So we have a double-stranded. We'll go back to just the knit version of brioche. So knit 2 together, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, and brioche knit. Now, we've slipped our marker. We have our 3 new stitches that we created with our increase in the last round. So let me move this slip over out of the way. So these are our 3 new stitches. You can see that the outer 2 look like purls at the bottom, and the middle one sort of disappears into that opening of the stitch below. To work these new stitches, we are going to slip one yarn over the first one, knit the second one, not brioche knit, just a plain old knit one, and then another slip one yarn over. So it looks like this. So we slip one yarn over the first one, we knit the second one, and we slip one yarn over the third one. So now we're back in our rhythm because the next one would be a brioche knit, and we just did a slip one yarn over. Every time we do a brioche increase or a brkyobrk, that is how you will resolve those stitches on the next round. So those 3 new stitches will always be resolved as a slip on yarn over, knit one, slip on yarn over. Later on, there will be some increases for specific sizes that are actually a 5-stitch increase as opposed to a 3. You will still do the same sequence as you work those new stitches. It would start with a slip on yarn over, knit, slip on yarn over, and then another knit, slip on yarn over. So any of those new stitches, you will not go into the row below, you will not do any like knitting together of any sort, because they're all going to be single-stranded stitches. All right, I'm going to keep working in pattern across my back section until I get to my increase that happened on the other end of this panel, and I'll meet you over there. All right, so I have reached the other end of my back section, and I have my 3 new stitches from the increase the row before. I'm going to do the same thing I did at the other end. I'm going to work the first one as a slip one yarn over. I'm going to do the second one as a knit one, and I'm going to finish it with another slip one yarn over. So at the beginning of each section, you will see a section of work in pattern rules, and that sequence we just did is part of the rules. So anytime you are working a brioche increase, the next row you're always going to do that new sequence of stitches as part of your work in pattern, rather than typing it out every time that's how you resolve those stitches. So just keep that in the back of your mind. When you're working in pattern and you get to an increase, that's how you work it the next row. So we'll slip our marker. We have one more section of work in pattern to marker. So my first one is going to be brioche knit, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, here, and we get all the way to the end of the section and we slip our marker. Now we have our other end of row 4, which ends as such. We slip one yarn over, we do another brioche purl, so we purl these 2 strands together, and then we end with a knit one. And that is row 4. And let's move on to row 5. All right, in row 5, we will be increasing the front sections next to these sleeve markers. So we start our right side rows as always with a slip one with yarn in front. And now, keeping with our established pattern for the front sections as of right now, we are going to knit one, and then we have our double stitch. We are going to brioche increase into this stitch in the normal way, brkyobrk. So insert, leave it on the needle, yarn over, insert one more time, and we now have our 3 increased stitches there. From here, we are going to work in pattern all the way until the very last marker. All right, so I'm going to keep working in pattern all the way across, and I will meet you over at the end of the other side sleeve. All right, so I'm at the other end. I'm just finishing up this sleeve section, working in pattern and slipping that marker. I end row 5 by increasing this stitch, brkyobrk. So insert, leave it on the needle, yarn over, insert one more time. I now have 3 new stitches there. And then we finish it off with a knit one and a slip one with yarn in front. So the knit one is solely because in the next row we are about to combine these two stitches, and I didn't want there to be an extra strand of yarn going over the top of that. So otherwise this would have been a slip-on yarn over, but because we're about to do a decrease, I didn't want it to be too bulky. So speaking of that decrease, let us jump right into row 6. These are the only decreases in the entire yoke, all of the sections. You will only be decreasing this row. Everything else is increases. All right, so we're gonna start with a knit 1 because it's a wrong side row. We're going to slip, slip, purl these next 2 stitches together. So slip, slip, purl is performed by slipping knitwise. So I twist the stitch the other direction. Do it one more time. So I've slipped 2 stitches in a row knitwise. I'm going to put them back onto my left needle, and then this is the tricky bit. I'm going to purl them together through the back loops. So I bring my yarn forward. These are my 2 loops that I want to go through. I want to go through from the back, catch my yarn, and pull through. Okay, let me show you that one more time. So I've got my 2 stitches, they're a little bit twisted now. I've got my 2 stitches that I slipped and then re-established on the left needle. I want to purl them together through the back loops. So I bring my yarn forward and I put my needle through from the back and then out the front, grab my yarn and work it through. All right, that's the only one you need to do like that. The other one at the other end is a purl 2 together, much easier. So we did our slip, slip, purl. We're going to knit 1. Remember we had our 3 new stitches from the brkyobrk earlier. The first stitch got pulled into that slip, slip, purl, otherwise it would have been a slip-on yarn over. So this is our second stitch from that increase, which is a knit 1, and then we slip 1 yarn over for that third new stitch from the increase, and we slip our marker. We're gonna work in pattern all the way across to the other side, and I will meet you when we get over here. All right, so I'm at the other end of row 6. I'm about to finish this sleeve section. All right, so now I have arrived at my 3 increased stitches from the brkyobrk from the previous row. I'm gonna work the first 2 as I would normally in pattern. So I'm gonna slip 1 yarn over the first one, and I'm going to knit 1 for the second. Now we are going to purl these 2 stitches together. We don't have to slip them and return them like we did with the slip, slip, purl. We can leave them as they are. We'll bring the yarn to the front, insert our needle through both stitches, grab our loop, and purl through. So that was a purl 2 together decrease, and we end our row with a knit 1. So that was row 6. We resolved those increased stitches, plus we pulled the edge stitches together a tiny bit more. And you're still probably like, why are we doing this? Because when we pick up our neckline later, we want a nice row of purl stitches to pick up from. We don't want our row of knits along the neck to get pinched into it at the end. So this is just giving us a border of purl stitches between the selvage edge and the knit column, which is about to spring out of this stitch here. All right, let us move on to row 7. All right, let's begin row 7. In row 7, we increase our back section next to our stitch markers like we did in row 3. But the front sections are about to become much closer to normal as we go. Now that we've done that decrease, things are gonna get a little bit more regular in these front sections. We start with our slip 1 with yarn in front, and then we are going to knit 1, and now the instructions say work in pattern. So we can. We have a single stitch coming up, we slip one yarn over to make it a double. We have a double, we brioche knit to make it a single. All right, we are going to work in pattern to marker 2 times. So I just did it once to get to this marker, and I will do it again to get to the second sleeve marker. So I worked in pattern all the way across the first 2 sections of the piece. Now I'm at my back section, and I have a brioche stitch ready for me. I am going to do a brkyobrk, a increase. So I knit through, keeping it on the needle. I yarn over, and I knit 1 more. So now I have my 3-stitch increase, and now I will work in pattern across the rest of the section until there is 1 stitch left before the next marker. So I will do just that and meet you on the other end of the back section. All right, I've gotten to the other end of the back section. I have 2 stitches left. I'll work in pattern for the second to last, and now my last stitch I'm going to increase with a brkyobrk. So I knit, yarn over, knit. Now I work in pattern across the sleeve section. And I slipped that marker. Now I'm at my final section, so I work in pattern until 2 stitches are left. We only have 4 stitches, so I work in pattern for 2 stitches. So this is a yarn over stitch from before, so I need to knit it together. This is a single, I need to make it a double. And now my final 2 stitches, the second to last one, I'm instructed to knit 1, and then I slip 1 with yarn in front. And that's the end of row 7. Row 8, we are going to start with a knit 1. And this is the only stitch left that's kind of an outlier from before. We are going to work it as a slip 1 yarn over. And then we can work across the entire row, slipping every marker, working in pattern. I just want to get through that, resolving those back increase stitches one more time, just so you can see that in action, since it does count as working in pattern. So I'm getting through my sleeve section. Great, so now I'm at my 3 stitches from the increase, 1, 2, 3. I do the first one as a slip 1 yarn over. I do the second one as a knit 1, and I do the third one as a slip 1 yarn over. And that is considered working in pattern after you have done an increase. So now you're going to work in pattern across the entire rest of the row, doing the same thing with the 3 new stitches over here that we just did over here, and I will meet you at the other end. All right, I've gotten to the end of row 8. I just slipped my last marker, and I work until 2 stitches are left. Again, we only have 4 because this is a yarn over. It only counts as a 1 stitch. So we work in pattern for these 2 stitches, and then we slip 1 yarn over this last one. So now it is fully in pattern with everything else, and we end with a knit 1. We only have a few rows left in section A, and they become much easier now that we have finished up all of the adjustments to those front sections. So row 9, you are going to be increasing next to these markers and then resolving on the next row as normal. And then row 11, you will be increasing next to these markers and resolving on row 12. And I will actually catch up with you on row 12 so that we can place those final stitch markers. All right, we have arrived at row 12. We are on the wrong side. We know that because the tail is coming from the left end of our work. We're going to begin with our knit 1. We're going to work in pattern until 1 stitch before the marker. So I'll work in pattern, across these first 4 stitches. I have 1 stitch left. And now I am going to place a new marker. Now, I only have, at the moment, 4 markers that fit these needles. But a little trick, if you have run out of stitch markers that are the correct size, is you can take a piece of contrasting colored yarn and just make your own little ringlet of yarn. And there you go. You got a new stitch marker. All right, so I placed my new stitch marker, I slip 1 yarn over, and I slip my marker. So I've placed my first of the 2 stitch markers that are going to be added in this row. I work in pattern to marker, slip marker 3 more times, so that'll take me 1, 2, 3 all the way to that other end. So I will meet you over there. And don't forget to resolve those brkyobrk stitches that you made in the back section. All right, I've gotten to the other end of row 12. I slipped my last marker. Now I will slip 1 yarn over and I will place a new marker. I'm going to use another of my little ringlets here. And then we work in pattern until 1 stitch is left. And we knit that last stitch. All right, congratulations. You have now completed section A of the Nell sweater.